I want you to get together.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another wonderful episode of the We Figured It Out podcast. I'm your boy Michael,
And I'm Matt.
and we are the End of Days Best Friends. And today is going to be the first episode of 2026 for us. What is it today? January 7th. So we're a week late, but we have a guest, Paul Stobbs. He's a self published author. And before we get into the actual meat of the bone of like why we have you on here for, because the specific title of the book and everything that you do have is what drew me to it, and then I'd heard you're speaking elsewhere. But tell a little bit about yourself first before we get into that, an introduction. I'm sure I'm not doing it all justice. There's a ton of things you do if you go and look at your social media, so have at it, man.
Sure, yeah. So my name's Paul, and I run a YouTube channel called Understanding Conspiracy. I do have a sister channel as well called Understanding Creativity. You can see it's a paintbrush and pencil logo down here. And generally, I'm a scattershot conspiracy theorist. Is probably the best way to describe me. I discuss anything and everything to do with the world of conspiracy, including the cultures within the conspiracy culture and the factions and kind of the disagreements and the wars between them. I talk a lot about the journey of becoming a conspiracy theorist and like a truther, and kind of the losing loved ones, friends and families, trying to share the truth. I offer tips and hints on how to do that effectively without burning every bridge around you, because you know what it's like. You know what it's like, yeah. I don't have to preach into the choir here, Hopefully it's not too late for most people listening, but sadly my advice is more like a after the horse has bolted type of situation. But we live and learn, and hopefully younger generations can get there before it's too late. But that's generally what my channel is. I have a podcast called The Truth of Therapy Sessions, which I do every Sunday, and that's also on all the podcasting platforms, which is just about that. And I get guests to come on and share their stories, their journeys, podcasters as well, and minor celebrities, I suppose, as well as just general call-ins from the listeners too. Just because everybody's going through it, no matter where you are, what walk of life you come from.
Absolutely.
When you discover the truth, there's a process, and I think we've all gone through the process. I think hearing that from other people kind of help ease that dis-ease which we all kind of feel after, like I said, trying to tell everybody around you. Go ahead, sorry.
It's okay to be curious, and talk about it, and you don't have to be like shunned for it, or seek out knowledge from somebody else. What got you? How long you been doing this? The conspiracy show.
The channel started in March of 2014.
Okay,
so a while now. Almost 12 years. Yeah. Almost 12 years, yeah, it's coming up, isn't it? But I actually started my own journey in about 2011, just in the build up to the 2012 end of the world stuff, with the Mayan calendar. I kind of got swept up in all that, and that was my moment that made me go down all the rabbit holes, which led me to where I am
What
today.
do you think happened with that?
I think nothing. Fuck, I remember it. The polls
they just quit making the calendar one day.
Yeah. The polls didn't
we had
shift.
to stop sometime.
Planet X didn't turn up. Nibiru
They think
didn't come
they
back
had the
in.
math wrong. Like some explanations are, the math was wrong, so it's actually coming later, or we missed it, or it did flip, and nobody noticed.
I think psychologically it had an impact. I think it got people thinking for the first time about the nature of reality and the finite nature of existence, and how anything could just happen at any moment. And the media was hyping it up. They were releasing films like The Day After Tomorrow at the same time. And like they were really like hyping up this idea that the world could just end in a huge cataclysm beyond all comprehension, that nobody can stop, it's impossible, or a solar flare goes off us. They're all coming out at the same time.
And then we went into the zombies after all that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think if anything, it may have just been a mass trauma ritual through mass media to get people hyped up to throw them off base a little bit, to be honest. And you can say what you want about that. I don't think things have been the same since 2012. It feels like a bit of a going over a threshold moment in history, where after that date, it feels like nothing's changed. Like technology hasn't really advanced either. It's like we are in a black hole of some kind, and all we've really seen is just a degradation of things since then, of civilization, moral standards, and everything around us seems to have I feel like we're in like a stasis period since then. But what we have been witnessing is just the degradation of the human mind and thus civilization along with it. Maybe that's all it was. Maybe it was just a signifier for the controllers that from this day onwards we're kind of putting our brainwashing into full gear, you know.
I remember even in 2001 with the or 2000 Y2K was going to happen and all this stuff. And you're in the UK, you told me, people can obviously tell by your accent. So I don't know if it was the same, but here when 2000 happened, people were like, oh, it's going to reset and we're going to lose everything. You know, how does stuff click over to zero? But they did mess with us. I remember watching it. And when the clock ticked over, like New Year's Eve with Dick Clark or whatever it was that we watched, flash to snow. They like cut the TVs out on purpose to make you think things went out. And then like 5 seconds later, it came back on. And it, you know, it is pointing to you being like, well, maybe they're setting something up there. They try to mess with you right off the bat. And it's, you know, 25 years later now. So
I can believe it. I can believe it. I mean, I would have been 8 around that time. I was born in 92. So I would have just turned 8, maybe. Yeah, something like that. 4th of July is my birthday, Independence Day, funnily enough. So, I would have been quite young for the Y2K problem, but I do remember attention from that time. I do remember, I knew there was something about it that was sending people a little bit strange, but I suppose my moment that I remember would have been the 2012 hype. That would have been my version of that, which I experienced, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember 2001 too, right? 9/11 happened in America. And then that it's one of the ultimate conspiracies, you know, it's like one of the mother conspiracies that you can get into if you're
most debated for sure.
Yes. So I mean, I think if you're American, that's probably the biggest one. What brought you into like focusing strictly on the Nephilim? Because your book we're going to get into here, the Nephilim look like clowns.
Yeah. So like I said,
were you always religious?
No. I mean, conspiracy, like I said, was the main theme of my channel when I started, you know, in 2014. There's a bit of a story I'm going to tell here, and I've told it many times, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible, so and hit the key points, you know. But
whatever basically, you need to do, we're here.
Yeah, I was raised relatively a-religious. My dad was raised Catholic through my grandma, his mother. She was devout Catholic, you know, very devout, twice a week going to the church and had the rosary, Mary and everything, shrine in her bedroom, all the rest of it, you know. And I didn't understand it as a kid. I was like, that doesn't seem right. That seems a bit weird, a bit odd. Like, and my dad wasn't, because he had it forced down his throat. I didn't think he just wasn't religious as an adult, and wasn't
seems that way with our older generation.
So I just wasn't raised religious at all. It just wasn't in my household. It just wasn't even like a conversation, to be honest. It wasn't mentioned. But I saw my grandma, you know, and my granddad. And my granddad maybe not as devout as her, but he went to church. He was a part of the community, a pillar of the community, shall we say, you know, a member of the conservative club in the region, which is like how Britain works. You have like these pubs, these clubs you can become members of, which are affiliated with the political parties of the region and stuff like this. And you know, he was he was respected in his own way, I guess. But I mean, it was an honorary title. He didn't actually have any power. You know what I mean? When he was made the president for like 2 years. But the point is, like, you know, they were good people, good examples of upright citizens involved and religious. You know, and they had that Christianity behind them. So I guess they were always there as an example to me. But I was not religious. No, in fact, I would say I rebelled heavily against the Bible and Christianity in my edgy teen years. You know. We have something called religious education in the UK in the high school system. RE, you have 1 lesson a week of RE, and it's a DOS. You just sit around and laugh and don't do anything and talk, and you know, it's silly. And the teacher tries to teach you about religion. Everyone just doesn't care in a secular school, you know, where there's no religion. It's not really a. And I would.
Does that still happen today?
Oh yeah, they still have RE today, where they try and teach. Okay. The whole idea is you teach all the kids about all the religions that are out there. So you give them an overview of each. But you don't go deep into any particular religion. It's just like a state-run course, you know. And funnily enough, I actually got a B in that, like graded at the end of it, because I knew a lot about Christianity, because I went out there to try and like debunk it and say, look how ridiculous this thing is, and look at all this horrible, cruel God who does this type of thing, you know. And most of the kids in my class didn't know anything about anything and didn't care, so they were all failing miserably and not getting any grade at all. And it didn't count towards anything. It if you fail RE, you fail high school. I know America has a completely different system to us. It was an inconsequential grade. It doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't count towards anything. So it didn't matter if you failed.
They'll burn
but I
your
didn't
school
fail,
down
you
here.
know. Yeah, it's like I didn't fail, you know. I actually got a high mark because I was that. I thought about these type of things, belief systems, and what do people believe, and why do they do what they do, and I was always interested in it. But even if it was from more of an anti perspective growing up, but then as I leave my 13 edgy years, you know, my skateboarding years, I can leave the baggy pants and chains behind and all this type of thing, and I go into, you know, my actualizing years of being like 15, 16, 17, going out into the world more, leaving school, you know, and I was on a journey. I wanted to know what was going on, but I kind of was also a bit of addicted to cannabis by this point through peer pressure and smoking and the rest of it. You start quite young in the UK with that kind of stuff, you know, and drinking and the rest of it. And I kind of fell into trying salvia. If you heard of salvia before, salvia divinorum, it was actually really readily available then in that time.
Oh yeah.
You could get it at a head shop. You know, it wasn't illegal. It wasn't a controlled substance or anything. You can go to.
I have no idea how it was legal, right?
Absolutely, you know. But this was the early days of YouTube as well, like the fresh days of YouTube, and there were videos all over YouTube of people doing salvia trips, you know, and they were howling like
sandwiches or
they were howling like
salvia.
hyenas, you know what I mean? Yeah, and rocking back and forth and just looking insane and like not with it, you know, and making all these noises and screams and. Everyone's laughing at them, and we were looking at it thinking like that. Let's try it, you know. That's what we were like. It's like, let's try this. What are they seeing exactly? What's going on? What's making them have this? You know, we didn't understand, and we realized we can just get it by going to like the place you get bongs from in town, you know, and they just have it there behind the counter in a little bag and this funky cardboard packaging, and it was really easy to get. Like it wasn't even like hard, and it's you know, I only know this now, but it's actually just as powerful, if not more powerful, than dimethyltryptamine. It's not a joke. Like, it's a really potent entheogen, you know, extremely powerful psychedelic. So I did that at 16 anyway, and that kind of blew the doors open on me, unfortunately, and everything I thought I understood about reality, quite scientific, atheistic minded, coming out of that whole edgy Bible babble stage, you know. I realized, oh no, it's not what I thought. Like, I've seen some things now that I can't unsee, unfortunately. I'm like, okay, so what do I do? What do I do with this? Like, 'cause I'm a truthful guy. I might be wrong, but I'm not lying, as Owen Benjamin says, you know what I mean? And I was wrong about the atheist stuff, but I believed it. I believed there was no God, so I needed answers. Okay, so now I know I'm wrong about that. I need to go out there and find out what's going on, you know. So I started my spiritual journey, if you want to call it anything. And naturally, you don't go straight to Christianity. You go to the New Age, because that's just the pipeline for the secular northern child who wasn't raised religion, I suppose, you know, in the UK. So I went into more the spiritualist aspect, the Tao, the Eastern mysticisms, Buddhism, Hinduism, this type of stuff, meditation stuff, and consciousness understandings and philosophy. You know, I went down that route. Psychological interpretation understandings, Jung and the collective unconscious. I was searching for answers to what these things I saw in this dimension were. What was this dimension exactly? Where did I go? How did I leave my body? Where am I going when you leave the body? I had so many questions, you know. And I went on that spiritual journey through the New Age route. From maybe like 17, 16 to 23 or something like this, you know. And during that time, I was an artist. I am an artist. I went to university and I got my degree in fine art. And for those 3 years I was there, I was exploring psychedelics heavily. And a lot of it became about my artwork, to be honest. I was doing loads of sacred geometry drawings and these type of things because as an artist, you get drawn to pattern and form and shapes and understanding the principles behind perspective and form and pattern. You know, just the nature. I loved nature, trees, leaves, flowers, and the patterns in things. And I was looking for all of that while doing psychedelics and microdosing LSD every other day and smoking weed 5 times a day, doing DMT whenever I could, you know. And I was going out there drinking heavily, partying, doing MDMA. Typical university art student, you know what I mean? I was pretty bog standard stereotype, to be honest. You know, I was just living that life and I wasn't really thinking about it other than I wouldn't call myself like a hippie new age type. I was still the like logistical atheistic attitude type person, you know, straight down the line grounded British person. You know, I wasn't dreadlocked hippie wearing sandals or no shoes and trying to align my chakras with crystals or anything.
Yeah.
I wasn't that guy. I'm still like this now. I dress the same, you know, but my mind was very much in this. I want to understand consciousness. I want to understand who I am. I want to understand the spiritual world and the physical world and the relationship between them. So I was doing these things and journaling and actually like focusing when I did them. Like, what am I looking at? What am I being shown on LSD when I go for this walk through the forest? Like, what am I actually witnessing here? And I've realized a lot about the creation. And I also started to realize there's a creator because of this, because I could see the form, I could see the design, the structure that held it all together, you know. And again, I didn't want to accept that there was a creator, so then you initially go down the whole, well, we must all be God collectively or something, or our consciousness is one and we've all kind of
every time
filled each body with the same consciousness, and we forget that we're God, and when we die, like a balloon, you pop that balloon and the air goes back to source and it's back to its original state again. But we're all that air, you know, just in different balloons, and we all believe we're unique and separate, but we're not. We're actually all one consciousness. So yeah. God is that, you know. And I went with that for a while, but it just didn't work. Like, practically speaking, it's kind of like, no, I don't think that's true. Because when you do something like DMT, for me, it very much showed me, like, you are not God. You did not make this. You did not make this, okay? Like, this is not you. Stop thinking it's you, you know? And you get a lot of people in the New Age world who like say, oh, you know, I've lost my ego and become one with the consciousness of God and I am God. It's kind of like, there's nothing more egotistical than saying you've lost your ego. Shut up, you know? I couldn't stand that
Matt's
attitude.
a big fan of saying that, and we'll come up with something, or somebody will say that, and Matt goes, "Oh man, your God must be pretty small then."
Yeah, like, but I couldn't stand those people, because I was around them because I was doing these things, and I was like, "Shut up! Like, you just sound like the worst. You're insufferable, you know."
Yeah.
And I just couldn't. They're not my people, the New Age people, but I've been there, done that, you know, and listened to them. I heard them out, and I tried it their way, and my life was just getting worse. Like, objectively worse. Like, and I was basically a drug addict, synapse burnout type person who had gone to every extreme to try and find answers, and I was just isolated and more confused than ever, really. But I knew there was a creator, and I knew there was a creation. I'd observed the creation long enough to realize something made this that isn't me, you know, separate from me. I do not have the capacity to create this, but I'm certainly experiencing it heavily, you know. And I wanted to understand who the creator was. And I then fell into the 2012 stuff around the end of my degree. So my work started to become about conspiracy. And you'll find while I'm going through all this psychological looking for God process with the psychedelics, I also then fell into conspiracy research and started to realize the New Agers have their own view on what the conspiracy is, you know, and it goes a lot along the lines of evil archons controlling our energies to use us as batteries to feed them off our negative energy, and we just need to become, again, the Kundalini stuff needs to be realigned, and you need to awaken to your true self and open the third eye and ascend to the fifth dimension to become the people we're supposed to be. And they have this whole crazy, the age of Aquarius is coming upon us and the rest of it, you know. That's their view on what's really going on, you know, and then the Christians have their view, and it's kind of like, this is about Jesus and what he did. You are not God. There is a God separate from you, and he's given you a way back to him. But there are people in this world who are also working against that and want to do anything they can to make you not realize who you actually are in Christ Jesus. And I was like, nah, that can't be the case. I was like, no way is that true. That cannot be the truth. No way. Is that the answer, you know? And for a long time while doing my research in conspiracy, I avoided it. So I went from the New Age stuff to the Gnostic alchemical stuff. Instead, you know, we can do it ourselves through enough work and enough knowledge, or that type of thing. And if we can just understand things better, then we can ascend to become like gods ourselves, separate from this evil demiurge, create a stupid god or something, you know? You have all these ideas, but again, practically, they have no answers or no solutions to the problems we're actually facing in reality. It's all headspace stuff, you know, they've got, you know. And tangibly, again, I was getting worse. I was lost, broken mentally and literally, you know. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? What's next? What am I supposed to do here? Like, with all this knowledge and this information, like, it's hopeless. It's a black pill, you know. But then you hear about, no, there is hope. Like, you've been saved. You can be saved. It's fine. Someone's done the work already, you know, and there's nothing you can do. Like, take that off you, take that burden off you, you know. So I was listening to some of the Christian perspective on conspiracy, and I was bumping into pastors and preachers of all kinds, of all denominations, you know, and soaking in the gospel as best I could. And it was always, I was softening up to it as time went on, I suppose, but still vehemently against it, using the psychedelics to search for answers. And eventually I got to a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. God, I've been hearing a lot about you. If you are real, if this is what's going on, then please show me. You know, I just asked, simply broken down. I was at a hotel, funnily enough, miles away from home. I was on a weekend party for my now brother-in-law, for his, we call it a stag do here, you call it a bachelor party there in America.
Okay.
And I was there for the weekend for that. And I was at this hotel room, fancy hotel room, and they had a bathtub. So I filled the bath, and that's when I made this plea to God, like, just show me. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no direction. I have no plan. I've got all this information. It's terrifying. I don't know what to do with it. I'm scared. I have no answers still. If you're real, I need to know. And I kind of made like a pact, like, if you are, you've got me. I'm yours. Do what you want with me. You know what I mean? I'm willing to do whatever I needs to be done. Like, and then I had a bath, and then I submerged myself to clean myself, and then I shot out the bath as fast as I went under, because I just had this sudden rush go through me, my entire body that just took over. Uncontrollable, really. And I thought I was having a panic attack. I was panting in the mirror, you know, and it faded, and it wasn't painful. It wasn't actually a bad thing. It was just a shock to the system. This feeling in the chest, and then nothing really happened. And that was it then. I went on. But from that day, things in my life actually physically turned around and changed. I suddenly couldn't smoke a cigarette without feeling guilt. I couldn't smoke weed without that voice telling me, like, what are you doing? This isn't right. I suddenly felt shame and guilt for things which I prior never felt any shame or guilt about. I have, my tastes had changed, my desires had changed, and it's been a long process since then, but I'm completely sober. I don't smoke, I don't drink, you know, I don't have any of the desires I used to have. I'm now married with 2 kids, you know, and I've got my own business. I've wrote a book, and I have purpose and meaning and direction and the rest of it, and understanding. And my life turned around that day, and that was early March 2014, and I started the channel in March of 2014, you know, in the middle. And as a born again believer since then, you know, that spiritual, real, tangible transformation proved to me God is real, and if you ask, you will receive. And I've been trying to spread that message ever since, you know. And then that's when demonic attacks started happening. After that, that's when I started to suffer from the old hag strangulation in sleep paralysis stuff, nightmares upon nightmares, you know, being chased by the Hat Man in a dream who told me I owed him something, you know, and was coming after me to collect. And I passed out and collapsed, and the room went black at one point, and I thought I was having a brain aneurysm, was about to die. And then I said, Jesus, help me, under my breath, and it snapped back out reality. I was back immediately, you know. I feel like they were trying to kill me. Like, I felt like demons were literally trying to kill me. Some horrible spiritual wickedness of some kind was in my life, actively out to get me. And I learned the power of the authority of the name of Jesus to cast these things out and to protect yourself. And that was it. Then I was hooked. I was like, I need to understand this. I need to understand spiritual warfare. I need to understand what we're up against. I understand the biblical history. Where do these things come from? I have to know. That's just my nature. I have to know why this happened. Like, I can't just get on with life and pretend that didn't happen. I need the answers. So I did. And that's when my biblical research really got serious, because I needed answers to protect myself from what was coming up against me, you know. So I started learning about biblical history, and then I got into the Nephilim through that. And you understand where do demons come from? Well, they are the disembodied spirits, specifically of the Nephilim, these giants that used to rule in antediluvian age, you know, and post-diluvian age as well for a short period in Canaan. And you have to wonder, like, why does nobody know this? Because I always hear people saying, oh, well, angels are demons, fallen angels. It's like, that's not what it says. fallen angels are not demons. They're fallen,
Yeah.
they're angels, whether
Completely
fallen or
different.
not, you know. It's not the same thing, yeah, but it's kind of like you have to know your enemy to know what you're up against. So I kind of listened to a lot of the greats on this, you know, built on the shoulders of giants. You have like Gary Wayne, Rob Skiba, L.A. Marzulli, Zen Garcia, and all the names of the day, Steve Quayle. There was a lot of names back then, a lot of big people in that nephilology research, shall we call it, so if you want to call it anything, you know. And I was just soaking it all in the early days, just a fresh YouTuber with no subscribers, just doing the work, you know, trying to figure it all out. And I got to grips with all of that. And as a Christian who wasn't raised in a church, I felt like it was easier for me to do that kind of research because I didn't have any understanding of what I'm supposed to do. I didn't have any rules of engagement drilled into me as a child of how you're supposed to behave as a Christian and what information you're supposed to be looking at. And apparently the Book of Enoch isn't accepted by a lot of people out there, you know, and all these extra canonical books that flesh out this thing that is kind of a not really explained in the main canon we understand. It's kind of in the main canon, you're given a few lines. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came to the daughters of men and bore offsprings, the same one that became mighty men, men of renown. And it's kind of, okay, then just move on. Wait a minute. What happened there? You know, what do you mean? Like, give me 3 lines and move on. That sounds important to me. And then you have to go and find that information from extra canonical books that tell you the entire story. And the Book of the Watchers is just that, you know, and the Book of Noah and the all encapsulated in the Book of Enoch. So I kind of read it and I was like, okay, well, this explains everything. And it fits to my own actual experiences with what's going on in my own life right now, you know. So I integrated that, and then as time went on, I started having some spiritual attacks again, and I saw a DMT jester. Now, I always knew about DMT jesters because I was in the DMT world. I was doing the drug on the forums, listening to trip reports and the rest of it, and I knew it was common to find these jester-like entities when you go to the DMT realm. And Joe Rogan was popularizing at the time. Terrence McKenna had talked about these things in the 90s, you know,
There's a couple
basketball.
different, aren't there? There's like levels through that you can get to of like jesters laughing or gnomes. People talk about things like that.
Yeah, there's all sorts of creatures there. I think jesters are prevalent. They're very prevalent. And I've got my own theories we'll get into as to why there is varied creatures there. It's not just the Nephilim necessarily, but I would say the majority are, and the ones that look like jesters are the Nephilim specifically, you know, and we'll get into that, why I think that is. But we have these creatures, and I'd never seen them when I was tripping, but when I was sober for 2 years, that's when I saw one. I had a flashback, they're called, in the DMT world, where you go back to the realm without doing anything. And it happened to me, and I was confronted with an enormous black and white striped looking big, wide grinning jester monster. It wasn't wearing a tight leotard or anything. Its skin was just that shape and pattern. It was that, you know. It wasn't wearing a silly hat with bells. Its skull was shaped like that. No bells, just claw-like, spider-like horns, you know. But from our language, it's kind of like, well, it kind of looks like a jester, you know. Like, it's all we've got really to describe it. But it wasn't. It was a monster of giant proportions, you know, and it was looking at me. And then I was back before you knew it after 10 seconds. It was more like a vision than anything. And I was like, I don't know what to do with that. I'm just going to keep quiet about that for a while, you know. What do you do? Like you shut up, you know. Like, but it was there, you know, and it's kind of like proof to me, okay, these things are there. And then as time went on, I was listening to where the Nephilim come from. And I was watching these presentations from like Rob Skiba, where he'd show a lineup of like Conan the Barbarian, large pectoral muscle, tanned, brown dreadlocked, club wielding cavemen type giants all next to each other, getting in different sizes from man up to the biggest, you know, 30 L's tall and all this type of thing. You know, but I was looking at these depictions, I was like, this is too human. This doesn't make sense. You know, this doesn't look right to me at all, like not even a little bit. And I was just, as an artist, as a creative person, like, I'm a visual guy, like, and I was listening to the descriptions of the fathers of the Nephilim, the Watchers, and you look at other stories outside of Enoch, at other cultures, you know, and you get these descriptions of dragons everywhere, in all cultures, they're all over the place. The dragons were all over, you know, and even in China, they revere the dragons in many ways. You have Quetzalcoatl in North America as well. In South America, they've got their own thing going on. But the feathered plumed serpent was a big thing. If not that, it was some kind of thunderbird, eagle-like creature. You know what I mean? It was like an avian or reptilian or something like this. But fundamentally, they're both dragons. It's the same thing. Even today, we joke that, you know, well, dinosaurs, which are big lizards, are actually chicken monsters. You know what I mean? They're actually birds, not lizards. I think there was a bit of a hybridized thing going on with these angels, but they certainly didn't look human. You know, and I think when you get something like that, somehow genetically mixing with a human, the offspring won't quite look like a human being. It's going to look like something else, you know. And then that's when I started to make this connection through my own visions, experiences, and research and imagination. I put two and two together, and I thought they would have looked something like a clown, like a jester. And if people are seeing jesters when they take DMT, and the only thing that exists on the earth is this realm and the spirit realm, and the only thing that's in the spirit realm is the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, then there's probably something going on here, you know. So let's put two and two together and see what we get. So I basically did some research and started typing in like Nephilim, clown, jester, and I got nothing, like no hits anywhere. But I did find one video from a very small channel called the Epic Conspiracy. And he had like the all-seeing eye as his logo from Egypt, the Eye of Ra or something like this. And he made a joke video making fun of the Nephilim and people who believe in it. And he was pretending to be like a History Channel like documentary, you know. And he was saying the Nephilim had red hair and white skin, which can only mean one thing. They were interdimensional killer clowns from out of space, you know, and he showed the 80s movie and all this type of stuff and was putting on quite the mockery, you know, and he was making fun of people who believe that kind of stuff. So he wasn't a conspiracy channel. He was just some dude out there, the atheist, secularist, edgy type, making fun of people who believe in that kind of stuff. But I thought, actually, you know, there's something there. This clown and Nephilim thing, I think there is something there. So I started digging into it, and here I am since 2016, almost 10 years later, and I've got a book published. I have about 50 episodes on my channel dedicated to fleshing out this idea, numerous podcast visits. I'm working on the second book, and yes, what I discovered, to succinctly summarize here, is that what we call a clown in the Western world is a specifically created thing in the 1800s by Freemasons, the son of a Freemason for the British play stage. And it was modelled after the Rakshasa demons of India, which are man-eating monsters from Indian lore, and they look like clowns. And that's where the costume and design came from. It was literally modelled after the Nephilim of India, their version. They call them different things, but it's the same creature as far as I'm concerned, just all over the earth, you know, and they all have their own mythology surrounding them. And then even the jester itself, which they say is modelled after the king, it later became bastardized and changed into the more Venetian jester we see today, with the white face mask and the jester horns and the Harlequin pattern. Well, Harlequin was a character created, modelled after the giants of Europe. So the European version of Nephilim called the Wild Man. So whichever way you slice it, clowns have always been a representation of demons.
And giants.
Specifically the Nephilim, and giants too. And you'll find the clown costume is a caricature of Nephilim. So they have stilts because they were giants, or big shoes because they represent giants, or they have big wide grins because they have serpentine mouths inherited from their dragon parents. They have multicolored clothing because their skin is multicolored like lizards or reptiles. And they have the white face. That seems like a common moniker for some reason. Like the Nephilim just are very pale in complexion with like colors interweaved over that white canvas. Big red lips again, because a lizard with lips is weird. Humans mixed with lizards look strange, and I think that's why they have these big red lips. The red nose, many references throughout history. Some of them in the North America refers to them as the noseless ones. So there may have been a hole there, a red hole, which is what the red nose kind of represents a void of nose in some way. But then at the same time, pale people can suffer from extreme rosacea, which results in what's called a rhinophyma, which is a big red bulbous nose. So it's possible they had that problem, and the older they got, the bigger their nose got too. It's actually
You
lines
see,
up,
you'll see like
you know.
depictions of giants in like fairy tales from a kid or something, and they're these big, bald, creature looking things that are almost like men, but they have big bulbous noses, and they're kind of
Yeah,
jewelly and wrinkly, and it's like, what is going on here?
yeah, but even that I would say is wrong. That's not what they look like. Like even that's a falsification of what because we don't actually know what they look like. We made assumptions it would have looked human, but the giants didn't look human originally. They were a hybrid between a dragon and a human. And that looks like a clown. Like that's what we call a clown by our standards. And that's because what a clown is a model of the Rakshasa versions of the same creatures. So that's exactly what it is. And I've got the history and receipts to prove it. And it's all in the book and on video. It's obvious once you actually look into it and how this happened. But not only that, my work also then is an anthropological study of the whole earth and all the cultures out there who have this tradition called ancestor spirit worship. And if you actually follow the trend for every continent, every country, every village that has this old tradition, these practices, they dress up like something to channel the spirit of that thing into their body, to then give it stuff, eat things, drink things, have sex with things, whatever it is, so the spirit can enjoy it through their body. And then the spirit gives them stuff as an exchange. It's like it's a transactional deal, and it's repeatable across many continents and many tribes and cultures. And lo and behold, how do they dress? They put white face makeup on, a big red headdress, multicolored sequin patterned clothing with ribbons of many different varying materials and forms based on the culture and what's available to them, and they take drugs and do these dances, but fundamentally they dress up like clowns to channel the spirits on the other side, because they're channeling the same entities, the Nephilim, which are the only thing on the other side, really. Now there's something to be said for the variation on the other side, and I do think there are humans who did genetically engineer themselves just before the flood. And it's talked about in the book of Joshua as the mixing of kinds. And they did it specifically to stick the middle finger up to God, basically. And also to hybridize yourself with an animal would give you superpowers, the speed of a cheetah or the strength of an ox or the wing of a bird or something, And if you actually look through ancient history, you do have harpies, mermaids, centaurs, fish people, and horse people and bird people and all this type of thing. And it fits the narrative that the Bible's telling you.
All sorts of Egyptian lore, right? That
exactly,
every animal
but
is a human.
Not even that. Even in Ecuador, the Canary people of Ecuador, they have flood.
Okay.
They have a flood mythos where two brothers climbed to the top of a very tall mountain when the earth flooded and just about survived, barely. And then when the floods receded, they went down to a cave in the middle of the mountain, and food was there waiting for them. And then as they went further down, more food was waiting for them, and food kept coming. And eventually they learned that two half bird, half woman creatures were leaving this food as a gift for them. So they survived the flood, is what we're saying here. So two superhumans who had the ability to scale a mountain survived a flood without dying of starvation or thirst, so they were not human. They must have also genetically engineered themselves by this point with something.
Yeah.
I don't know what, but they were hardy in nature. And when they came back down, two bird women greeted them, who must have floated above the water and flew above it and then rested on top with their hollow bones like birds, not really sinking or anything and waiting it out like the rest of them. And once the floods receded, the two men raped those two women and populated the entire area again. That's their mythos. Okay? So that fits the narrative, actually. It sounds anti-biblical, but actually that's the biblical narrative. That is the biblical narrative. There were people who genetically engineered themselves, who hybridized, and the giants were there before and also after that. So they did make it past the flood. And I think genetically engineering yourself will give you an advantage. If you got the gills of a fish, a flood's not a big deal. If you could hibernate underground like a bear, it's not a big deal because you're waiting out the flood underground. You know, it's kind of, there's benefits to hybridizing yourself, and I think it did happen. And I think this is where cryptids come from today. The modern
if you're
cryptid
disembodied
phenomenon.
too, you know, who says you even need to be here for that?
Exactly. You know, there's something to be said as well for portals being opened by fallen angels to allow some of their children to wait it out in a pocket dimension. Gary Wayne kind of talks about that. And I think that could be possible. You know, there's many ways the corruption made it after the flood, and we have stories everywhere talking about it all over the earth. You know, and I don't think it undermines the Bible. I think in every way it makes the Bible true. It's the Bible told you this happened. You know,
shared knowledge from these angels that wasn't supposed to be. You know,
absolutely.
And who's to say that the knowledge they're sharing wasn't in the specific reason to keep Nephilim alive?
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. So you were saying there's variation on the other side. Well, I might theorize that I guess a consequence of corrupting your flesh is the soul gets corrupted with it, because they're not separate from one another. You are a living soul breathed into the body that was created by God, you know, and the two are not really separate from one another until God ordains it, you know. But you are a unique individual, and there's no one else like you physically and spiritually, you know. And you and your body are one in that sense, and there wouldn't be you without the body to represent the spirit of you. You get what I'm saying? And I think that the two aren't interchangeable. And I think when you corrupt the flesh like that, you've corrupted the soul simultaneously, and therefore made yourself incompatible with heaven. Like you've stuck yourself on earth. And I think when they died, they also suffered the same fate as the Nephilim, who never should have existed either. They were stuck on earth in spirit form. So that might explain why there's such variation of creatures in the spirit realm. But I think the ones who run it, the generals, shall we say, the lieutenants, are the Nephilim. And even they answer to their parents, the Watchers. Did you get what I mean? The angels. And I think there's a military hierarchy of spiritual beings here based on this. But make no mistake, there was a point in time where they were in the flesh, and God got rid of them, and now they're in spirit form instead, and that's where demons come from. And we're still at war with them. And like I said, there's still cultures today who dress like them, to mirror them in the spirit realm. When you mirror something in the spirit realm, in the physical realm, you create a channel between those two things. So people are channeling the spirits by dressing like them. It's actually a very well understood practice, but we in the West don't believe that. We don't understand that that's a thing. So when we're going around dressing like clowns at Halloween, you are playing with fire, you know, and we don't know that. And that's the point. That's the plot. That's what we're kind of up against here. And that's what I kind of cover in my work. It's a cult in the West. You're not supposed to know that that's what it represents. Our clown costume is the same costume worn by these ancestor spirit worship cultures who know what they're doing. You know,
do you believe then in like the tribalistic way that say they dressed as their like opponent or somebody they were going to scare? You know, do you think maybe that's why they would dress like the Nephilim?
Oh, they were trying to channel spirits to give them strength. Yeah.
Okay. Not trying to confuse them and fight them or something.
Well, it's they worship these things. They don't fear them. They want to be like them.
Okay.
They venerate them, you know, and it's kind of like they are the spirits or the Nephilim are a symbol of strength. Of course I'm going to dress like one to channel that power and energy through me so I can go and defeat my enemies, you know. Yeah, of course it's to put fear in the enemy and to give them strength. So you dress like the thing. And a lot of cultures are built around Nephilim worship, and we just don't realize it because they have different names for it. You know what I mean? And their own stylized, culturally specific aesthetic of what it represents and how it looks. But the common thread, you find there are common aesthetics, that shared aesthetics across cultures, where you realize white face, red hair, colorful clothing. Okay, you put those three things together, you tend to get a Nephilim channel going on, and you can be possessed by spirits more readily. And again, there's variation because, well, you know, not all snakes look the same, not all lizards look the same. There's a vast variation, and that does happen and occur. But when you break it down to its basics, its core aesthetics, its clown features, and that's basically what my work is twofold. It's the history of the clown costume, created by the occult for the specific purpose of being a tool to channel demons, borrowed from the anthropological work I've done, where you can see these other cultures already do this and have been doing it for a long time. And that's kind of where I get my conclusions that the Nephilim did look like clowns. It's a secret that's being utilized today in the industries. And if you dress like a clown, you channel a Nephilim spirit. And even if you're ignorant of that, you're playing with fire, unfortunately. And that's kind of the reality of spiritual warfare. The consequences of what you do in the physical have impacts in the spiritual, and vice versa. Then you're not disconnected from it. We are having a spiritual experience every second of the day. And our secular, separate worldview from that is not sufficient to explain reality, unfortunately. And until you realize what we're actually living within and under, you are actually, unfortunately, whim to the spirits, because you're not testing anything, you know. And what
it's
you wear
almost preferred that
counts.
way, you know. They don't want you knowing that you're doing it.
Precisely, which is why I think they didn't come to me when I was doing the drugs, because I was already happily useful to them.
Yeah.
You know, doing drugs and drinking and hedonism and the rest of it, and, you know, chasing pleasure. Well, great. The demons are like, we've got him. We don't need to reveal ourselves to him. He's doing it without even knowing we exist, and we get to use his body to feel those things because we're in there, you know. As long as he doesn't know we're real, then we can do this forever. But as soon as I
as
get
long as
myself
you're
over
not
to
worthy to God. Yep.
Yeah, as soon as I gave myself to Christ and kicked them out with the Holy Spirit, they were pissed off. They're like, we've just lost a very useful vessel, and if we can't have him, nobody can, I think is what happened. So they tried to kill me. That was it. And obviously, my defense was Jesus Christ, using and knowing my authority and using his name. And I think enough of that was eventually got to the point where it's like, okay, we'll just leave it now.
What did you see?
On, you know?
What did you see on your salvia? I guess trip, is what you call it.
I went through a mandala chrysanthemum portal made up of all the colours of the room I was in, which was just a boring cube bedroom with like blinds and wooden furniture and grey walls and the rest of nothing, you know, the typical teenage bedroom at that time in Britain. But the world basically just melted into this formless form of pattern and geometry, and I went through it, and I was in a dark void, and I lost my sense of self and who I was. I completely became one with the environment and the world and everything else around it, but it was delusional. I was actually confused. There was no clarity behind it, and my sense of identity was basically torn apart, is the only way to describe it, because you can't really talk about a psychedelic experience with words. I can't describe to you what I saw because it transcends language, unfortunately. You know, that's the nature of a psychedelic experience. But I can tell you how I felt: terrified, scared, and as though my identity was complete and totally annihilated. Because I had built a false identity around the idea that there is nothing spiritual. It's all just chemical reactions and psychology, you know. And those experiences proved to me immediately that I don't understand anything. And it felt like an hour or two, but it was literally 10 minutes. Yeah. And it was scary being left alone in that place for a long time. It's kind of like a dream as well. You can't really remember a dream after you wake up, but I remember how it made me feel. And fear was the main thing, but not fear of the environment itself, fear about what it taught me.
How many times have you done it?
Oh, I did salvia again. I did do salvia again after that.
You did it after that?
About a year after that, yeah, when I was 17. And at this time, it was at a party and everyone was watching me, and there was a lot of people there who were drunk, and I started laughing hysterically, and I couldn't stop. I couldn't stop laughing hysterically as suddenly they were like on pedestals above me, flying up into the air as the room did that whole thing again, you know, and I was just laughing like a maniac, rocking back and forth. And you kind of get stuck in this loop where you can't stop doing this thing, like, and you don't know you're doing it, and you feel like you're trapped in this cycle that you can't control of movement and space and everything, but it feels like it's an eternity as well. And all you're actually doing is just rocking a little bit, but it feels like the world's moving and you're snapping back into place. It's a really jarring experience because you're kind of leaving your body. And when you do leave the body, I think, depending on what drug you do, impacts the way you're going to see the spirit realm. It'll always look different depending on what method you've done to get there. And salvia's flavor of the spirit realm is confusion. You lose your mind. You become manic and you don't know who you are or what time it is or what's going on, and it's kind of like a deliriant more than anything. You become delirious. You're not focused, you know what I mean? And you completely lose, and that's a scary, it's always a scary experience because of that. But I found when I did DMT, it was the same place, but more crystal clear, and I could understand it, and I didn't lose who I was. I was still cogent and could think. You can't think when you're on salvia. It's impossible. You become this jumbled mess of psychosis and delirium, you know, and I found when I did DMT, the crystal powdered form, 10 minutes, skyrocketed straight to the spirit realm, but I'm there, I'm walking, I'm talking, I'm clear, and I know who I am, and I know what I just did to get there. It's a completely different experience. It's the same place, but it was no longer this fractaled mess of confusion, but it was clear and crystal. I could understand it finally because I didn't lose my mind simultaneously. But if you do like mushrooms, you kind of don't really break through. You're still in the physical world and you still see the world around you, but it's like gloopy, thick, like gunky type, syrupy. The air feels like molasses, and it's warm. And you get this body high with it that comes with the head high, and it's kind of, you see the psychedelic fractal nature of everything, but it's all like flowing like water and liquid and bubbly, and it's hard to explain, earthy, But when you do LSD, which is synthesized from psilocybin, it's crystal clear, it's on point, you have the energy, you can move through it, it's not thick, the body high isn't there, but the mental high is there, and it's fine-tuned, and you can see the geometry of everything around you moving simultaneously. You see everything all at once, and it kind of dials up your perception, so you're no longer just taking a little bit of information, but all the information just comes flooding in at once, and you see everything at once, which your brain normally doesn't, because you can't process all that information all the time, because you go insane. You won't be able to do anything, but when you're on LSD, that's what it does for you. So like I said, each drug I've done has shown me the same realm with a different like augmentation, like a like a late, its own stylized version of the same place. I don't think you go to different places. I think it's always the same place. There's the physical realm, and then simultaneously there's this wider perception of it, which we call the spirit realm. It's the same place as the physical realm. It hasn't actually, you've not gone anywhere. You haven't left your body. You've just started to perceive more of what's already there, which I don't
think, I would
normally.
ever. I've done salvia. I think I've done it like 3 times, and the last time I did it was exactly what you're talking about. Like my sense of identity was taken from me. And I woke up like, I think outside of the house I was actually in with half of my clothes off. But the world had been ripped from me. I couldn't explain it either. It was a feeling. Exactly like you're talking about. It's kept me away though from like DMT, acid, and all that stuff, because I think the more I've looked and seen that stuff, you're exactly right. It is a realm there, and you can get to there. And if you're not in control or even know kind of what you're doing, that's terrifying to me as a person
one
myself.
Danger. Yeah, one danger is that you yourself aren't in control, and you don't know if you're safe or not, or what you're actually dealing with, because you're perceiving it wrong. Because not wrong. Like, you might not realize, like, you see a dog, for example, and it's beautiful and incredible, and it's complex, beautiful creation, and you come up to it, you might get bit because you're not with your senses, you know what I mean? Because you didn't notice the muzzle while you were at it, It's that kind of thing. Like, there is those dangers of yourself. You could hurt yourself, which is why, you need a guide, they say, to stop you from bumping into things. But I think the real danger comes from wandering around no man's land, not realizing you're in the middle of a war zone. I think that's the biggest danger, because I don't think that realm, or being able to see more of the world, literally, because that's all you're actually doing. You're just tuning up your frequency dial and letting in more information, and suddenly you see everything that's there, including the spirits. Okay? But it's always there. It's never not there. It's just when you're sober, that bandwidth gets narrowed again, and you only see the color spectrum, which is the 7 colors light spectrum we live within, that narrow bandwidth. I would say the problem is people don't realize that you have an enemy on the other side, demons. It's infested with them, parasites. Okay. It's not that perceiving it is bad. It's not that it's completely necessary. That place is creation. It's a part of God's design. integrated part of existence. It is necessary. It has to be there for you to have a body here. They're not separate, you know. It's like the plumbing of the universe, the coding of the wiring of the behind the walls of existence, you know. Without it, you wouldn't have a functioning body or house or home or anything to live within, you know, because it has to be there. But it's riddled with rats. It's riddled with monsters, with parasites who want to kill you, you know, and use you and siphon your energy and use your body. And if you take these drugs and they come up to you and start talking to you and you don't know what you're up against because you've done no research whatsoever, they'll lie to you. They'll tell you they're your friends. And they'll tell you anything. Oh, you're God. Oh, yeah, we're interdimensional time travelers from the future who have transcended our bodies. Oh, yeah, we're ascended masters. Oh, no, we're aliens from the Pleiades constellation. Or, you know, whatever. They'll tell you whatever they think you will believe because they know you. Yeah, because they know you. They know you. They've been there for thousands of years. They're not stupid. And it's kind of, you know, they know what will work. So, yeah, the danger isn't you bumping into things or running around the street naked. The danger is you could encounter an entity and believe its lies. You know, that's the real danger, I would say, which is why we shouldn't be going there. That's why God says don't do it. Don't deal with pharmakeia and all this type of stuff, because you don't know what you're dealing with. There's enemies there now. And I theorize after the flood, when most of these things were killed, not all, but most. At least the infrastructure of the kingdoms they built were completely wiped out. So they lost their authority and power, which is a win as far as I'm concerned. But when they all became disembodied spirits, I think God limited our perceptions. I think he made us only see the narrow rainbow, 7-colored bandwidth. And that's because it says God put a rainbow in the sky as a covenant to Noah that he wouldn't flood the earth again. And when you see the rainbow, think of me in this covenant, you know. Does that mean rainbows just didn't exist before the flood? Do you know what I mean? Like, and you think about it, well, that would make sense if you consider that, well, maybe before the flood, we actually did see more. We were completely in tune with everything, and there was no limitations to our perceptions at all. We were living in both the spirit realm and the physical realm at the same time by that point, you know?
Yeah.
Not heaven. Heaven's outside of creation, you know, but within the creation, there's levels of perception, and right now we're at the bottom rung now, but we saw it all originally. And to protect us from the demons, which killed and corrupted us to begin with in the physical form, to protect us from the spirits, perception limited. So they can't communicate with you anymore. It was a mercy. It was to save us. And thank God that he did that, because we managed to rebuild. But there have always been people out there who want to communicate with them and get back to them and learn the knowledge and the wisdoms they have to offer and the powers they can give people. So you get cults, you get secret societies, you get rituals, you get drugs, you get all sorts of witchcraft and pharmakeia and sorcery in order to communicate with them again. And that's, you know, at least it's hard. At least it requires a lot of work, you know, and it's hard for them, but there are things they can do, sure, to communicate with demons, and people do. And, you know, that's been our problem since the flood, and we're still dealing with it today. It never stopped. But I guess that's my spiel. I don't know what more I can say. That's where my work has taken me. That's how I got to where I am with this. And my message really fundamentally is a Christian message. My book is a gospel trap. It might be talking about clowns, but it's a hook really for a generation that needs something novel like that to be interested in the Bible. I know the Gospels are enough. Don't get me wrong. You don't need anything more than the truth, the way, and the life. But unfortunately, and I know this because I've lived it, to reach a generation who doesn't have any context to understand why the Bible is important and needs to be understood, they need something to get them interested. They need something first, something novel, something strange. And that thing, I find the clown actually works really well to get people who have never even thought about these concepts to understand it. So my first 10 chapters of the book is just biblical history from a Christian contrarian viewpoint. It's a summation of all the works of the greats who came before me, explaining where Nephilim come from and what the flood was, and what the human history actually is from Adam, and why we have Jesus and what the Savior. That's just the first 10 chapters of the book. And then after that, we go into the history of the clown, ancestor spirit worship cultures and DMT and psychedelics and the rest of it. And then the second book is an exploration, which I'm doing now, of all the cultures who have their own practices doing this to kind of prove that there's a common thread of clown-like features. So that's in the works. I'm about a third to half of the way through. Hopefully I can get that done middle of the year, fingers crossed. But with 2 kids, I just can't promise anything. It's one of those.
Yeah, right.
So yeah, there you go. That's it. That's everything.
That's awesome. So you mentioned a little bit like it had fallen back and it's a Freemason construct, that had been pointed out. I want to get into that a little bit, but I still want to talk about like drugs here for a second in the spiritual realm and tie it into that. Because you can look back at like ancient history, and they're smoking peace pipes or, ayahuasca. There's all this stuff. Do you think that before Freemasonry clearly and all that was a way that they knew that it was Nephilim too? Or, a lot of it's used ritualistically, but I don't know.
Yeah, I understand that the desire to want to believe that there are good spirits and bad spirits, and there's some good shamans and bad shamans, and but I've really got to the conclusion that witchcraft is witchcraft. Doesn't matter how you want to spin it, The only thing you're going to be communicating with, biblically, historically speaking, are the disembodied spirits of either the Nephilim or those people who corrupted themselves. And there might be varying degrees of evil and malice to these creatures, I don't think they're two-dimensional necessarily. But a demon is a demon is a demon is a demon. A spirit is a spirit. And I think shamans gain their power from having spirits attached to them. That's how they have any power at all. They have a spirit or a familiar or something of some kind that they can call upon to do stuff for them, to give them the powers that they need, like healing people included. I'm not saying they don't have abilities. They certainly can heal people, and do these type of things. But fundamentally, although it's for the tribe and everything, it's to exert influence and power in the physical realm through a vessel. That's what the spirit's using them, fundamentally. And you have all these stories, and I've researched a lot in the book, but you get these stories of like North American tribes, and there's varying native tribes of many kinds. You get like the Inuit tribes and those on the Pacific Southwest who talk about battles between good shamans and bad shamans, bad shamans curse people and make people ill, and you need to find a good shaman to come and counter the bad shaman's things. It's kind of like, what? You're just caught in a worldly trap there. When really all you need is Jesus Christ, and the good or bad shaman loses all power instantly.
Yeah.
Do you get what I mean? So it was all
shamans and magic men.
Yeah, it was all bluster to begin with. Like even the good shaman's powers are rendered null and void because all spirits are under the authority of Jesus.
Yeah, where's it coming from? Yeah. Exactly. Where's the power coming from?
But I understand the desire for each culture to want to think their culture is so special and unique and we're the good guys or whatever it is. But I don't think any culture is sacred, not even my own. They're all the same. They all have the same problem of ancestor spirit worship at some point, which is not your grandma or granddad, but Nephilim. That's what they call them, the builders of the culture, ideas, and civilizations. Primordial ancient gods of a very dark past, which guide us today in our decision making. These are the Nephilim. They're talking about these ancient kings and gods and rulers of an ancient past. Not your aunties and uncles who passed away 3 generations ago. That's not what they're talking about when they say ancestor. And these are the primordial gods they channel for power. Now, you can say, well, I use it for good. Doesn't matter. It's witchcraft. You've channeled the demon spirit for power. And I think there's no real selfless reason for doing that. Not who you think you are. Another idea is Korean shamanism. They're called Madangs. And Korean shamans are predominantly female, actually. It's like 98% female. You get male versions, but it's a predominantly female profession in Korea, South Korea. And a Madang is usually hired by a rich person. Like a very wealthy, influential family will hire a Madang shaman to do a ritual called a Kut ritual, K-U-T. And at this ritual, there's prerequisites that must be performed to prove that you are a real shaman. Okay? And the first thing is that they have these 2 knives. They have a trident and a blade. and they have to, after doing a certain ritual and dance and doing the right sacrifices and burning things and incense and meat and oils and putting money on stuff, and they then cut themselves, and they don't bleed or get cut by the incredibly sharp blade. They prove the blade sharp, but then they hack their arm and nothing happens, okay? Because they're being protected now by the spirits that they work with to prove they have this kind of power. They'll run it along the tongue, they'll do anything, and they won't bleed, they won't get damaged, okay? And they have to do this. And then the final proof is that they channel the spirit, and then the spirit talks through them, okay? And then the family asks the spirit questions, answers to family problems, financial problems, advice on what to do next. And this is what the whole point was. That's why they hired the shaman, to get in touch with the spirit for advice, okay? whatever it is, whatever problem they've got. And they have to be able to channel the spirit and let it talk through them. If they can't do that, then they failed. They're not going to get paid. All right, that's the job. That's what they were there for, and so you have to prove it by doing the whole cut thing. Now, if you look at the stories of these shamans and how they got their powers, it's tragedy every time. They don't want to be a shaman. They didn't choose to be one. They just suffered such emotional, traumatic turmoil that suddenly they get visited by a spirit that says, you're now a Madang. You are now going to work with this series of entities who are now attached to you. Go and find this Madang over here, and she'll train you in how to utilize your powers better. So they get up and go, because now they're a Madang, because they suffered a great amount of trauma, and that trauma seems to open them up spiritually to perceiving the spirit realm. Okay, now that actually is very important, because I think this is what the occult do. This is why occultists and Luciferians and the rest of it in these satanic families abuse their children. Okay, they traumatize them in order to open them up to the spirit realm, so they can more readily get in communication with, well, their confidants on the other side, the people they're working with, the spirits they're working with, to forward this agenda, this long-term occult agenda. Okay, trauma and tragedy are actually the prerequisites to gaining your powers to become a shaman to begin with. And you find actually it's not just a Korean thing; it's actually quite a similar story even through the native tribes of America, like the Heyoka, for example, is a popular one. The Pueblo Heyoka and the ones of the Dakota tribes. And they channel the Wakinyan spirits, which are thunder gods. Okay. Nephilim, basically. The Nephilim seem to be always linked to thunder for some reason. Everywhere you go, they have the ability to make it rain or thunder. Always the case. This is their version of the same thing, And this thunder god, the Wakinyan spirits, well, the shaman's job is to communicate with it, to tell it to either stop or bring rain, because they live in a dry, arid place that needs the rain, in the Pueblo Indians of Mexico, for example. Or if you go to the more northern tribes of the plains of America, where it's raining all the time, they're saying, please stop the rain, it's killing us. So they communicate with the spirit and tell it to stop, So the rain dances are to bring or prevent rain, depending on where you are in the region. But the way they dress is identical, black and white striped lines. Okay, so Heyoka is always black and white striped, because they're communicating with the same entity, but just in different regions of the country. Ways. To channel this entity. And you look into the story, and people say Heyokas don't choose to be Heyokas. It's forced upon them by the spirits themselves through great tragedy. It's always the same story. And they say these things now in response to these people out there who claim to be Heyoka spirits and all this type of thing, like modern, like New Age types who are saying I'm a natural born Heyoka and all this type of stuff. And it's kind of like the real ones are like, you wouldn't want to be. Like, the real Heyokas don't want to be Heyokas. It's horror. Like, it's a terrible thing, you know what I mean? It's a great burden. It's a great curse and a burden upon them, and like a lot is demanded of them by the village as well, as the only intermediary between the spirit realm and the physical realm. It's kind of it's not actually something you want to be. It's something you're forced to be by the spirits themselves. So yeah, you talk about shamanism, and I guess a lot of people do it like a romantic lens, but it's not. It's not. It's pain and horror every time to get there, and it's just a struggle while you're in that position too. And it's rife with bad, evil people as well as good people just trying to get by. It's a minefield, and all of it, the cycle will not stop unless people realize what they're actually dealing with and get Jesus Christ.
Well, yeah,
with
that's
them,
not, you know,
you know.
horror and pain is not Jesus.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, and I think a lot of people just have this romanticized image of what it means to be a shaman, maybe through media or something, but the
What do
reality
you
is
think
really
about
horrible.
voodoo? Like
So
Papa Lengua.
yeah, so voodoo or vodou, as Haitians
Okay.
call it, which is from West African Vodun.
Because they kind of clown
Um,
up, you know?
yeah. So voodoo is actually really interesting because it's a strange mix of a lot of things. So you get the French colonizers of Haiti, along with the African slaves they brought over, you know, and I'm not here to get into the argument of who started slavery and all the rest of it, but you know, you have these Catholic and Jesuit and Freemasonic French people colonizing Haiti, and you get the natives there to begin with, you know, which have their own odd ancestor spirit worship culture. But then this African influence that comes over, mixed with this strange meld of Catholicism and Freemasonry, they all speak French there as well. You get Vodou, this odd African ancestor spirit worship religion that dresses like Freemasons with top hats and waistcoats while also doing crosses and Christian iconography mixed in with it from the Catholicism.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very odd mix, you know, Freemasonic, Catholic, African ancestor spirit worship. It really is when you look into it, you know, and it's just because of they actually all kind of meld quite well into each other because of the veneration of the icons from Catholicism,
Mm-hmm.
saint
It's
worship,
more about
icon worship,
gifts.
idol worship, basically, yeah,
Yeah.
and sacrificing to them and lighting candles and giving meat and the rest of it and drinking, mixed with Freemasonry. So you see a lot of square and compasses in their own sigils they make during these moments, and cubes and all sorts of things as well. And also then the ancestor spirit worship cultures of Africa. So Papa Legba, Baron Semedi, all these characters are actually characters from a pantheon from West Africa, kind of brought over and changed a little bit. But these spirits demand stuff. It's okay, they demand things in exchange for power and influence and money and all sorts of things. You know, power generally is what you get by having a relationship with the Awaz, I think the how it's pronounced, of this pantheon of gods. And they have this particular family, the Gede family pantheon, where you get Papa Legba and Baron Criminel, Baron Semedi, and Mama. I think there's a Mama version of there as well. And it's kind of, they have this family of gods you can kind of make contracts with by dressing like them. So people are dressed in that purple suit with the top hat, which is basically a purple version of a Freemasonic garb, and then put the white makeup on, the death face, you know, and then they end up channeling the spirits of Baron Semedi, and then they smoke cigars and drink whiskey or rum, I think it is, because that's what he likes. Then in exchange,
That's right. Cigars, right? They say you
giving
smell
the spirit,
cigars.
giving the spirit that pleasure, you can then request something in return. So it's just the same practice as a lot of places all over the earth. That's just their way of doing it. But again, they dress like the thing to channel the thing. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And the reason it looks so strange is because it's just this odd amalgam of many, many ritualistic based faiths and religions melded into one. So that's why it's quite unique. Haiti's really interesting because even the people of Haiti say, you know, when we kicked the French out, the only reason we managed to do that is by making a deal with the devil. And Haiti is still cursed to this day because of that. And there's a lot of Christians in Haiti who know this and preach this and are in a battle every day with witchcraft in their daily lives, using Christ as authority to battle it, you know. But yeah, even the Haitians believe they're cursed. And obviously you had remember the hurricane that destroyed a lot of Haiti and the rest of it in the relief. That all they put the people themselves, like as superstitious as they are, for good reason, because I've explained what their religious beliefs are. A lot of them put it down to the curse. It's kind of, this is the price we pay for kicking out the French and getting the devil to help us do it. You know what I mean? But to maintain order and peace, I think they have to keep maintaining the sacrifices to him. So they keep the Vodun religion going, you know what I mean? And it's a bit of a horrible situation they find themselves in spiritually when you think about it. And to the common Western man, it sounds like nonsense, but to these people, it's a Tuesday afternoon. It's normal. It's the daily. It's the life they live daily. You know. Yeah. So that's what I think of Voodoo.
So like there's a lot of conspiracy too. I kind of lean this way also with the Nephilim and them still being around with like the royal family. You know, in my opinion, they have kind of how you touched earlier, those real slimy big smiles, seeming to me. And they wear a lot of ordained jewels and colors and like checkered pattern, almost, and silly, red hats, things. What do you think about that? Do you think the Nephilim would be out in the open like that, first of all? And second, do you think they would even be full on people?
I think today they would be looking just like us, if not indistinguishable from humans. I think if there is any Nephilim DNA that made it down to the modern age, it's incredibly diluted by this thousands of year point, I think the royal families try to keep it in the family. They try to keep the blood pure, but they usually end up becoming inbred monsters who end up locking away some of the family members so the public doesn't see them, type of thing. I don't think the reality of the situation is that they can actually get away with doing that for so long now. And I think that's why
hybrid technology.
Well, maybe, but I think when Christ came, I think he came to put an end to genealogies. All can be saved, no matter how corrupt or how far gone you are now.
Okay.
And I think there's a good reason for that, why we're not supposed to dwell on things like blood anymore, or family rights and all this and the rest of it. Or like, I think even the time of Jesus, I think the Nephilim gene was very diluted and mixed into everybody probably at that point. I don't think it's unavoidable. I think it's the vast population growths, and maybe there are some pure bloods out there still to this day, but even those who still might have some Nephilim blood in them just look human now, and they are human. Maybe there's some extreme outliers there who for some reason don't grow a horn every now and then, or a tail or something, or like something odd happens genetically, but either still talk, walk, and eat, and have to die and live like a human. I don't think we have giants walking around who eat people anymore, who look like clowns and lizard people. Absolutely not. No. I think when you start getting into that realm, I find it leads to nothing fruitful. Personally, I think it started leading to you thinking there's a Nephilim around every corner and you can't trust anybody. I think the royal family do cling on to the divine right to rule through the blood, because they have angel in their blood, don't you know? It's because that's what Nephilim are, half angel, half human. But I think their attempts to maintain that purity have only ever caused inbred monsters and problems and genetic deficiencies and issues, because you can't. So I think they've given way to that and now it's just about authority through birthright rather than blood. And they cling to that now in terms of royal families and so forth. But you do have those families out there who do claim to be the house of the dragon, and they are the ones who, cling to that. We have powerful blood as opposed to those other people who don't have that blood, and even like Vlad the Impaler believes himself to be one of those people, and there's a lot of dragon mythos in Romania that kind of surrounds this idea, and all those people do believe they have the spirit of like a dragon in them, or the blood of a dragon, which gives them the ability to have strength and power to conquer their enemies. And it is a source of power and pride for even Europeans. But even then, he looks pretty human to me. And maybe there are some slight genetic markers, slightly extended skulls, broader set of teeth, double row of teeth, perhaps. And you see like the Paracas skulls, the Inca skulls, and all this type of thing that show this odd non-human form, but yeah. I think even those are probably gone now, dead and eradicated, and what you have is just slightly corrupted humans, but the world is fallen and corrupt, and I don't think it's worth dwelling on now. I think what we need to focus on now is our salvation and the free offer of being born again and renewed in the body, soul, and mind through the redemptive power of Jesus Christ's blood and sacrifice. And I think that's open to everybody, including the Gentiles, which is probably where you'd find the highest concentration of Nephilim blood, if there is any, because they were intermingling with everybody, and it was one of those things. But I think in today's modern world, where we are now in the timeline of things, I'd say almost at the end of the story, it's inconsequential. It really is to God. It just doesn't. What can we do about it? What it's not our fault. It was done to us. We can't blame us for it. And I think Esau might be a good example of the recessive nature of it. Like he was different from his brother, He was bigger, hairier, red hair, you know. And I think if it ever does manifest, it manifests like a recessive thing every now and then. Like I said, a horn here, a tail there, red hair here, but it's not like ginger people. I don't want people going out there thinking like ginger people are Nephilim, you know, because I don't think that's the case. Because
soulless.
I don't think that. Well, maybe that's where that mythos comes from, perhaps, you know, because the Nephilim did have red hair, but it wasn't orange hair like ginger people. It was blood red hair, like red.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like that sign behind you, red. You know, it was absolutely unnatural. Like, and these things glowed, you know, and the skin wasn't white like a Caucasian, pink and rosy and peachy. It was white like a dead thing, like a corpse, like a vampire, you know, like a piece of paper that's been bleached. They were white skinned, like not slightly different, multicolored like we are. You know what I mean? This is not about race. These things were monsters. There was something else, you know. They were dragon human hybrids. They are not humans. But I think what we have today, if there's any remnants of that corruption in our DNA anywhere, then the humanity side won, because we all look the same to some lesser extent or the other, you know. And now it comes down to, well, what are you going to do? Not what blood do you have? Who will you choose to serve? You know, and I think that's kind of my stance on it. It's an interesting topic to go down, but again, I find it fruitless because people start calling everyone in another race. It basically fuels racism. Like, and I'm not one of those liberal hippie left wing types who wants to point, no, you're a racist. I'm not saying that, you know, but it basically does. It makes you start not trusting white people, or black people don't trust white people, or white people don't trust black people, and it's kind of like it ends up turning into this like, who's the real Nephilim in the, you know? And it's kind of, well, I don't think that's the case anymore. I don't. There is a wheat and tares thing within the Bible. So there are definitely people among us who perhaps aren't human. You know, like they might be something else, something separate from. Like, and maybe they can pretend to be human, but they're not. That could be the case. But that could also be an analogy for just people who chose to serve Satan and people who chose to serve God. Still humans, just made the wrong choice, you know. So I don't know. I wouldn't like to go around Nephilim hunting personally, because I think it just end up leading to a very bad situation for everybody involved if you get it wrong, you know. Like, what if you're wrong and that person isn't a Nephilim? Then what are you gonna do, you know? Like, that's the problem, because when you're hunting monsters, there's only one thing to do to a monster, and that's kill it, right? You know. So who are you to around as an arbiter of who is and isn't a monster? That's kind of, you don't know. You do not look. They look human, right?
It's and like if they've been here this long, who's to say we're not all part of it now? You know, and that's what I mean. That's what you're saying. Yeah, that's the choice. We can be good or bad.
Well, people argue the RH negative aspect of the blood is the reason.
Okay, so the golden blood.
People who have the RH factor, or negative, basically. If you're negative, you're RH negative. Then you don't have the rhesus gene, I think it's called, isn't it? So those with it, they say, who have the RH blood, I think they say that they are human. Those who are negative are not human. I think that's what people are trying to argue. Like, you know, and I really don't think that's the case.
I've gone along my entire life being O negative, and I didn't know I wasn't a human. That's crazy.
Well, I'm O negative too, funnily enough, you know, just by coincidence. And I'm a universal blood donor, so that means, you know, anyone can have my blood, but I can't have anyone's blood. I have to have O negative, you know what I mean? But anyone can have mine. What does that mean? I don't know what it means, you know. Does that make me, am I the human with the negative then? Because all beings I see, you start getting into this thing. It's like, well, my blood's more special than yours, and it becomes ridiculous. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't actually make a difference when you get down to the brass tacks, does it? So it's kind of I find these arguments shaky at best when people start talking about RH stuff, and it's kind of, well, you kind of in your head there. The reality, the landscape doesn't call for this discussion. It's not necessary. If anything, it will only lead to division if you dwell on it. I think if we focus on what Christ came to do, to redeem all men, you know, he came to offer salvation to all, and then I think that you can drop that, well, I'm more special than you attitude because my blood is more rare or something. I don't. Yeah, it just seems foolish. You know. There you go. I can go on forever about that, but yeah, that's my.
You would be like, Yeah, you'd have the argument, and then it's like, well, we'll see who's more special when one of us needs blood. You know,
Well,
there's
I
always one
guess,
side to it, right?
I guess, yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, in the Bible, it talks about a couple times, like the Joshua wars, you know, where they've stumbled upon and they feel like grasshoppers looking, or they see the shoulders above the hills, and they've used, you know, the trumpets sounded and the walls fell down on the soldiers that they were fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no like clear description, you know. They do say they were large, but they still kind of give them human, you know, what's the attributes, you know. They all still look like humans in the Bible. um so where I guess what I'm asking with this today is, if there is no reason, or if it's been so watered down, why wouldn't the Nephilim's like goal, I guess, be to infiltrate everywhere as a human, you know, instead of, oh yeah, we lost, you know, there's no more gaining ground. Because I guess that's the real question too. Why are you a Nephilim when you know you're not going to win, when the blueprint's written out, you know, but you're out here still trying to appear as a human? Why not just be out in the Nephilim? Why not torment everybody all day?
Well, I don't think they can get away with it now. I think if they reveal, I think the numbers are so small that they have to remain hidden to survive. If there is any physical Nephilim still out there, you know, they aren't like they used to be. The flood worked. Like
Yeah.
the God's punishment to make them all murder each other before the flood, so the angels had made them come watch the children die. That was the punishment. That no, they're pretty much gone. Like, and there was a remnant that appeared after the flood, and then settled in Canaan, the promised lands to Abram. You know, and it was about God building a people and encouraging them to go and take those lands. You can go and get them; they're yours by birthright. You know, they're squatting on your property, and it took a while for Israel to build up the courage to do that. They sent a convoy out there to spy on the lands. And they said, you know, they're devouring the lands thereof. It's a land of milk and honey, but it's dominated by giants, and we're like bugs in their sight. We look like ants, we're like grasshoppers. You know, what are we supposed to do about that? Like, and you know, some of them were like, no, we can do it. Go, we have faith in, we have God on our side. But the majority were like, no, I don't think we can do this. So they had to wander the wilderness for 40 years. Getting into battles and fights with enemies who wanted to kill them, humans, you know, fighting the Philistines and the rest of it, you know. But what came after that generation was a battled, hardened, ready generation who knew what it meant to be in war and had no fear and conquered all their enemies because they knew they had God on their side, you know. And I think with that newfound, profound attitude and courage, they were like, let's do it. Let's go. And they did. And they slaughtered giants. You know, they mowing them down one place after another, you know, winning victory after victory. And, you know, word spreads. I think the giants were like, what the hell's going on? Like, who are these people come to kill us? Like, how are they doing this? Like, what? And I think some of them may have even fled, to be honest. I think some of them did. And you get stories of like the Inapag Sugsuk, I think they're called, in like the northern continents of like where the Inuits are, you know, and these ice giants who wander down every now and then to mix with human women, you know, but they create these offspring, you know. I think they're called the, it begins with D. I'm mixing them up with another tribe. I don't think it's the Dwamish, but they have this specific name. And they are giants who can sling seals over their shoulders like they're nothing and just run incredibly fast, you know. But their story is whenever they encountered humans, they'd run away. They wouldn't fight. They'd just flee immediately. And you can't help but listen to that and think, is it because they are the remnants of those who fled Canaan when God ordained the people to go and murder them and get them out of that land? Well, they ran knowing if we encounter humans, we die.
Yeah,
God's
that's a
on their
really good
side.
point.
You know what I mean?
If you've already
So
been decimated for eternity, you're like, ah, man, we better quit pushing
stay away
our
from.
luck.
It's like wherever we have a skirmish with people, we're gonna die. I think they knew that.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to live, you know, and God knows that, and He sent people to get us. And if we end up fighting the humans, we probably won't win the battle. So I think they were smart up north, and they avoided it, but they went as far north as possible into the icy plains to avoid people. You know, I think that's why they did that. Like, it makes sense when you really think about it.
The Bone Lake that we talked about on an episode, Matt, where it was like, I think it's somewhere outside of Russia, like in one of their high mountains, maybe, or Nepal, somewhere close there. But it's like a mythology of a large creature or something up there who keeps bones on the shore so that humans won't come near it, and he's known to throw like rocks down the mountain and stuff. They say it's just giant, and it's maybe it's a Nephilim hiding.
But it's strange, the giants do seem to fear people. Like in more modern mythologies, like they're hiding from people. And why would a giant hide from people? Well, maybe because they know, like, well, we've seen people slaughter us in Canaan, like where we settled after the flood, and we can't win. For some reason, we always lose. Like, always keep losing. Like David and Goliath, same thing. Yeah. Didn't take much. You're just one boy with a sling, you know what I mean, and a rock. And it's kind of they realize, like, we can't win this one. Like, we have a hit out on us from God. So let's just avoid conflict altogether, I think, is what the giants did in the modern age. Which is why I'm more like, if there are any people descendant from them living among us, even they're hiding. We probably don't see them on the public face. Like, everyone we see in the public is a puppet, even the Rockefellers, for example, or any power family, they're still just puppets, human puppets for the people behind the shadows who are hiding. Because it's we can't reveal ourselves, because as soon as they see us and they attack us, we're going to die. Like, we're not going to be able to carry on, because God has not ordained us to live. And obviously they fought through the lands of Canaan, but they failed at the end. They didn't fully deal with the problem, and they lost the lands again. Their inheritance, so this is what I mean. Like, so the Nephilim actually weren't all fully wiped out. And you go through the whole thing, and it's like, one of the king, he was not supposed to keep anything for himself, like the spoils of war, but he did. He took the leader, one of the kings, which was a Nephilim, and kept him alive. And then I think Samuel had to come and behead him at the end to finish off the job that the king didn't do. It's kind of like, you didn't listen to the commands of God, and now he's mad. Basically,
God said, "Take nothing and destroy everything." He's
like, "What have you done, you fool?" That's basically the result. It's kind of, don't you understand what we're dealing with here? So this is, but I don't think they fully dealt with the problem. If you read Numbers and the early books, but you best believe, if you believe it and you have God on your side, you have the power to conquer giants easily. Just believe it and go for it with all authority and power, and you can. And that's incredible when you actually read the stories, and it's only through pride and fear and disobedience to God did they lose the lands again and fail. You know what I mean? Because they got greedy, basically. But I think any giant on the earth who's hiding in a cave somewhere, like the Qumran caves, the Afghanistan caves.
Afghanistan.
We've heard that one, haven't we? The big
Kandahar
giant, the giant of Kandahar, yeah. And then in North America, you had the Paiute Indians fighting against the Sitikar. I think the Sitikar were the tribe's name. I think that the monsters they were dealing with had a different name. I can't remember what they called them, but either way, they were eating people. They were coming out, eating people, tribe members, and warring constantly with the Sitikar. And the Sitikar tried to reason with them. Like, they literally surrounded them in a cave and kept screaming, "Live like normal people, stop eating us, like, live peaceably, stop being monsters, just stop it, you stop now and we can have peace." And they were like, "No, screw you," from the cave, basically. Like, we don't bow down to humans. We don't, we're not doing what you tell us to do. Like, who do you think you are? We're the superior being, that type of attitude. And they said, "All right, have it your way." So they just covered up the entrance to the cave and set fire to it. Smoked them out, killed them, but then afterwards, when they went into the cave to look for the bodies, it just kept going and going and going, and they found nothing. So they probably escaped. You know what I mean? But the point is, they always lose the war and run. Yeah. Like, even the humans get beating them. Anywhere you go in history, the humans win. The
Yes.
giants do not win those battles or skirmishes, and it
I
just seems
think
odd. Go ahead.
I think that's like when people talk about the mud flood in Tartaria and the old world and this other civilization, these giant doors. I think that's actually what it was. This is maybe a Nephilim area and these giant doors, and it's under mud because they wiped it out. They were like, all right, you don't want to come out of your house here, we're going to bury you and leave you here. It'll be your
Maybe.
tomb almost. Yeah.
I've heard that theory. The other theory is that it was built during a golden age where people were bigger. I've heard that, and perhaps the millennial reign of Christ has already been here, and these are where the saints lived. And these cathedrals were all built by divine people. I've heard that one as well. I think it's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, because you get some ancient Roman architecture buildings with big doors and vast spaces as well. And who knows when Rome really was, if our history is to be believed or not, and timing of things. But if you go off even this historical narrative when these buildings were built, it wasn't during a time when there were giants, So you could also make arguments that, well, they had big doors to let in the cold when they needed it. It's like a heating system. But they also had big doors maybe to let in horses too, because kings would come through in processions and the rest of it. So there are earthly explanations for why big doors were made. That you don't have to go straight to giants necessarily.
But then you can look at some of the big doors though too, and then the handle is 20 feet up though. So you're like, all right, well, if you were bringing a horse in, why the hell's the handle way up there?
It does seem odd. I know. There's a lot of discrepancies. Trust me, I know. Like, believe me, I'm just trying to stay as level-headed about it as possible, because we don't actually understand why. We don't have answers really. I would personally say those were built a bit too after the giants for them to be for giants. Like, I think they're more modern buildings. I think the kingdoms that were around when the giants were around, all that infrastructure was destroyed by the flood. Think Atlantis.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Think the megalithic structures that are everywhere. That are like,
all right,
we don't know who built these. How did this stone get here? Like, who carried these stones? And say, oh, well, aliens must have done it, is what they're trying to say. Well, or a giant playing with Lego. Probably not a big deal. Moving these stones around. Like, the pyramid was an afternoon project for a giant and his kid or something. You know what I mean? It wasn't. We don't.
They're just playing.
Yeah, exactly. Probably came as a
castles.
There's probably a kit they could buy at the time. You know what I mean? Who really knows?
Goodness,
because when you're dealing with giants like the size of cedar trees, megalithic structures don't seem like that big of a deal, but because giants don't fit into the mainstream historical narrative, then they have to go to aliens, ancient alien stuff. You know what I mean? They have to come up with all this mythos and these lies to try and explain it away. And you can Occam's razor this. The most simplest solution is that giant people made them.
Yeah,
that's the most simple solution.
They were around.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we got to let you get out of here to your next gig here. What's one thing you want to leave us with?
Fundamentally, we talk a lot about demons. I talk a lot about demons, and these spiritual forces we kind of have to contend with on a daily basis. And I want people to know, fundamentally, they are a defeated enemy. That actually have no authority or real power. They have a lot of words and bluster and puffing out the chest type of stuff. But when Christ did what he did on the cross and descended into hell and took the keys of all authority to the gates of hell and heaven, he has dominion over everything now. It's all under his domain and control, including the demons, and they have to obey his authority. And his sacrifice gave you the same authority to tread on serpents. Okay, and I think that's the core message that I want people to realize. It's a message of hope. You understand your enemy, you can defeat your enemy. Okay, and I'm hoping my work is a way for you to understand and contextualize yourself within the biblical narrative enough to know what weapons you have to defend yourself with, what tools are available. And spiritual warfare is no joke. It's real. And I don't think there's a single human being alive on this earth who has not in some way encountered demons. There's just varying degrees of how much they're willing to admit it publicly. Okay? So I don't care if you want to tell me it's true or not, or that it's happened to you. When it does, call in the name of Jesus Christ. Know that.
Absolutely.
That's it, really. That's all I can really say.
Perfect. That's perfect. Amen. Thank you too for sharing kind of your testimony there at the beginning. I think how you started there. Everybody kind of has all different walks of life there too, so it's nice that to know that you're not alone out there. Everybody's going through something, and Christ loves all. You
Absolutely.
just got to go to him. So right on, man. Thank you for your time.
No problem. Thanks for having me. It's been good. Yeah, I
Yeah,
enjoyed it.
we're
Stay in
all
touch.
everybody in the show notes too. We're going to have your link to your book, and I know it shows like part 2 you're working on. You talked about that. We'll put understanding creativity and conspiracy shows in there, so people can find all your stuff. Check you out. You got a lot of cool stuff on YouTube too, so it's cool. There's like, if people want to learn more about the Nephilim clown, he's got a 15-minute video on there too that like breaks it all down real simple for the gist of it too. So I think people should check that out. Cool,
Absolutely.
man.
Thank you.
Well, we are the End of Days best friends. I am Michael.
And I'm Matt.
And God bless y'all, and talk to everybody later.
I want you to get together.